Okay, and welcome, Hoosier fans, to this emergency, unexpected Sunday afternoon episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers have apparently settled on a new head coach, and it is going to be Indiana legend Mike Woodson. And apparently coming along with Mike Woodson will be Thad Matta as assistant AD. And so as we do when a game happens, when there's news that breaks, we try and get on here as quickly as we can to react in real time and put it into perspective as much as we can for you. Lots and lots of thoughts. But we have to start with the man who broke the news. This is certainly where I saw it first. And that is Rick Bozich from WDRB, who is with us right here to talk about it. So, Rick, the floor is yours. How did this all transpire?
You know, it had gotten really quiet, Jerod and Brian, for the last 3 or 4 days. They'd done a pretty good job of keeping the gossip to a minimum. Other some of that misinformation that had been put out late last weekend. And then today I got a text from somebody. I have two sources that I really trust, and one of them said they heard Mike Woodson had really emerged as the front runner. And so then I texted, and actually I called my second source, and he said that at the point that he was very, very certain that he was going to be the guy. And I said, "Are you okay if I tweet that out?" And he said, "Yeah." And then not long after that, I saw that John Rothstein tweeted something, and then it got the seal of approval from Shams Shanaria. Those guys usually are plugged into the NBA agent world, and off we go. And I like the choice. I know that a lot of people are going to criticize it because Mike Woodson's never coached college basketball. But, Indiana's at a point where, I think it was time to go back inside the family. And Mike Woodson has coached the game at a higher level, which is the NBA level. And I think he gets the whole process. And I think the fact they're bringing Thad Matta in to sort of help him, who understands Big Ten basketball and what it takes to run a major college program, and can probably help hook him up with 3 really strong assistant coaches, I think it's a fine. They're going outside the box, and I think they were in a situation where it's fine to go outside the box. Porter Mosier was the other hot name, and I think he would have been a fine choice too. But after they didn't get Brad Stevens, whoever they did get, I think people were going to find ways to pick it apart. But I think Mike Woodson has a chance to work.
Do we have any details yet on what Thad Matta's role is going to be?
I don't know that. I know that Greg Doyle's been at the forefront of reporting that. He was the first one to have it. I would think that Matta would just be a guy who would help him in every way possible, whether it would be coaching, whether it would be assistance, whether it would be all the different, connecting things with scheduling or hiring a staff, just what it takes to be a head coach at a Big Ten school. Whether, there's a big, let's be honest here, there's a big PR part of the job that was really an F performance by the previous staff. And I think Matta will help them, can help Mike Woodson get a much better grade in that situation, which is important in terms of building relationships with AAU people, with high school coaches, with the media, with alums and fan base, with former players, all those areas where I think sometimes the previous staff fell short.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see the reaction, Rick. I think you bring up a good point that once everything happened with Brad Stevens, any hire was going to seem a little bit underwhelming if you got your hopes up that Brad Stevens was going to be coming. And a lot of us did get our hopes up. And I think when you look at this hire of Mike Woodson, there are obvious reasons to be concerned. He's never coached in college. He's never recruited. He's a little bit older. Like you can go through some of these things, and they are perfectly valid reasons. I understand why people look at this and are like, and maybe don't quite get it. Now a couple of days ago, and I kind of felt that way too when the name first came up. Now a couple of days ago, I kind of thought that there was not enough balance being brought to the conversation, decided to dig into it and found some reasons to like the Mike Woodson hire that I wasn't really expecting. Dug into his NBA background, which was much more impressive than I thought. When you hear his ex-players talk about him, the thing that they talk about the most is his ability to build relationships. His ability to kind of be an old school coach in mentality, but also to kind of be able to adapt with the times, both as a relationship builder and as an offensive coach. And some of those things, in addition to what you talked about with going back inside the family and kind of bringing that all back together, I kind of settled on this idea that it wasn't my first choice. It wasn't my second choice. There were people I liked above Mike Woodson that I think would have been maybe safer hires. But I've been really intrigued by the potential upside of this hire ever since I heard about it. And you can debate whether this is the time to take a risk like that or whatever. But I do think having a guy like Thad Matta there sounds like it can help to mitigate some of those risks, and maybe help to smooth out some of those things. So I know that there's going to be, some of that reaction out there, and we'll get into, that article was basically called Devil's Advocate, the 5-point argument for Mike Woodson, and we'll dive into some of those things. But I guess my kind of opening thought off the top is I would urge folks to, have whatever reaction you want, because we're going to have knee-jerk reactions to these things, and there are reasons to be skeptical. But I would have an open mind, have an open mind about some of Mike Woodson's experience and thinking a little bit outside the box and having some imagination for how this could work. I think it does require a little bit of that to make the case for it. And again, is this the right time in Indiana basketball to be doing that? I don't know. We're going to find out. But the other thing is, the last hire seemed like a really good fit. Everybody thought that it was going to work, and it didn't. So the most important thing is we should all have some humility with this one. Let it play out. And remember that we have an opportunity to kind of influence it with the statements that we put out in public and how we respond to it if we look at this from a fan perspective. And so I think it's important to be fair and analytical and, candid in how we think about it, but also be supportive, of the hire if you're looking at this from an Indiana perspective. So just some opening thoughts there. But your reaction to that and to kind of the reaction that you're seeing from other people.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, if a lot of other schools hired a 63-year-old former player and put him in charge of their program who had no college coaching experience, if Purdue did it, if Ohio State did it, if Kansas did it, if North Carolina did it, people would criticize that. It's not just an Indiana thing. And it is in some ways, a snapshot on the state of the program where the job isn't the same job it was 15 or 20 years ago. But it all depends on how it's executed. And it's sort of like draft choices in pro sports. There's always going to be the instant analysis, but the real analysis can't be filed for 3 or 4 years. And what I do want to say that the two sources that I've talked to, the thing about Mike Woodson is, A, he has coached the game as a head coach at the NBA, and he is known as a really good offensive coach. And secondly, as somebody explained it to me, a lot of this stuff is about relationship building. And with players today, as much as people want to believe that they want to come play at Indiana or Michigan or UCLA or whatever because they want to play for those schools, they also want to play at those schools because they want to know what it takes so they can become a professional player somewhere. And if you have a guy who actually knows what it takes to be a professional player, has been around professional players, if he can recruit and develop relationships, I think that can resonate with some people. Now, the challenge will be that a lot of kids, they might not know who he is because it's been a while since he's been a head coach. But he has been an assistant coach. And if you look at the Knicks this year, the Knicks might be the most improved team in the NBA. And you can give most of the credit to Tom Thibodeau, but you can also give credit to the assistant coaching staff, which includes Kenny Payne, who came from Kentucky, which includes Mike Woodson, who's been there. And Mike also has some background with Larry Brown when he was an assistant coach with the Pistons when they won the championship with Larry Brown. And Larry Brown, I've been told, is a big advocate of Mike Woodson. And so, I understand the criticisms. They're valid. I understand the skepticism. They're valid. But I think it's important to let the cake bake, as people say, and see how it plays out. And I think the Thad Matta component shouldn't be overlooked because he's an experienced Big Ten guy who knows the Midwest and knows IU. And so that also there were so many people who scoffed at the idea of Thad Matta coming back to IU. That's ridiculous. He'll never do that. There was obviously something to that a week ago. And his willingness to come to Indiana as an assistant AD says a lot about he believes in the vision that what Scott Dolson has for what the program could be. And then he's looking forward to working with Mike Woodson.
Do we have any other word? I don't know when you're listening to this podcast. We are literally recording this like 15 minutes after word broke, so stuff is still happening. Do we have any other word on who the other assistants are going to be, or has
not yet? And I asked one of my sources, and he said he didn't know that yet. But when I get off here, I'm going to call back and see what more I can get. But the thing I'll say when I think back on it, a year ago, I remember when Bob Knight came back to IU, and Mike Woodson was out of the NBA, I think, last season, and he was very involved in that group with Randy Whitman and Quinn Buckner and Patrick Knight, who were around Bloomington quite a bit and were important in mending fences to get Bob Knight back at Indiana for that Purdue game. And I think Mike Woodson at the time, that was in part a signal saying that he was open to being more part of the IU family again. And that part of the job, I think, is important. He wants to be at Indiana, that's, we've heard some stuff that's come out since Archie Miller has left from some of his people saying he didn't really want the job. You're never going to hear Mike Woodson say that.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Well, Rick, I know you're busy, so if you need to hop off, please feel free.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you stay as long as you can.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate
really,
it. Let's do it again where it's not so stressful.
So it's crazy. And there's NCAA tournament games going on right now, but this is everything stops for when it's Indiana basketball.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Rick.
Have a good Sunday.
Appreciate it. Okay. Going to bring in Alex Bozich here, and Coach Tonsoni is also here with me. Let's get your initial thoughts, Coach. I just want to get your initial thoughts on this. I know people are asking where Ryan is. Ryan is I don't know if he's going to show up. Ryan has thoughts, and you'll certainly hear his thoughts either on this show or the future. But he does have the link if he wants to show up today. But Coach, your thoughts on the Mike Woodson hire initially?
Yeah, on Thursday night's show that the mediocre question had a list of happy, satisfied, and underwhelmed until you talk yourself into October. And Mike Woodson was in that underwhelmed category. And I think I speak for a lot of fans that the initial reaction when Twitter started hitting was a little bit underwhelmed because of the fact that I just thought this program needed a jolt of someone who had been there and done that. But I think it's not going to take me to October to talk myself into it. And number one boost was the addition of Thad Matta in the role that Bill Comar now plays. I did look that up. So Bill Comar is the same assistant athletic director in charge, came with Archie. So that seems to be a position that's tied to the actual coaching staff, and a big part of the coaching staff will assist there. So that's been done in the past. I think Tom Crean also had that position filled as well. And so, again, I was hoping for someone with college experience. I'm not going to lie. That's what I was hoping for. That's what I thought maybe was needed in order to get this done. But we've done that in the last two times, to be honest, to critique my own thoughts, that we've done that and it hasn't worked out. And the more I'm thinking about it today, as I'm sitting here and listening to the opening comments, this seemed like it might have been Dolson's plan from the very beginning, because you heard leaking that they're interviewing Woodson, they're interviewing Chaney, Matta failed a physical. All those little pieces came out with a little bit of misinformation, but there was some smoke there where he was probably wanting to put together a coalition of individuals to get this thing correct and moving in the right direction. If that ends up being true and the program moves forward, this is a fantastic move. And we've said that we've trusted Scott Dolson, and I'm going to go back on that too. I said I trusted Scott Dolson. I'm going to continue to trust that he has the right, thoughts for Indiana basketball, and he made his decision, and I'm going to get on board with it, because that's just who I am. Call me a fanboy, but I'm going to get on board and root. I think there's some very positive things with this hire, even though it's not the clear-cut fancy hire that a lot of us were hoping to have. So welcome back, Mike. He wore 42. That was the same number that's been on my jersey. So, I think that's a good number for Indiana basketball, and I welcome him home, and I'll be very interested to see who's on his staff. I'm kind of hoping for, again, I'm not that IU guy hire, but if you're going to bring an IU guy back, let's bring a couple more back in and get this thing moving in the right direction.
Hey, and if you're trying to recover from some offensive struggles and teams that went 5, 6, 7 minutes without scoring, why not bring in the guy who scored 2,000 plus points? I bet you Mike Woodson's teams never went 5 minutes without scoring.
Well, we've talked so much about modernizing the game. I think this staff has a chance to do that. I mean, you're bringing NBA ideas. You can possibly, once you introduce yourself, to get NBA kids saying, hey, I know what it takes to play in the league. That is going to be a huge thing on the recruiting trail. And then you got a guy like Matta behind him with all the administrative stuff, organizing the recruiting, helping him with things that he might not know because he's only been at the pro level. So when you look at it from an X's and O's as a coaching, I think the X's and O's are taken care of. The worry is that experience in all the other stuff that college coaches have to do to run a major program. That would be my concern, but it looks like they're trying to compensate for that with the Thad Matta hire.
Yeah. And look, and I want to bring Alex Bozich in here now, and Alex, I want to lead into it by saying this. Whenever something like this happens, everyone's very quick to kind of stake out a position, either, and this is part of the Twitter culture that we live in, where we have a very short amount of space to make a position. I think if you're saying this hire is awesome, or if you're saying this hire is terrible, you're wrong, right? Like, I think there is a lot of nuance to this hire that just requires us to be patient, and patience sucks, especially when you've missed the NCAA tournament for 4 or 5 years. None of us want to be patient. We want to get back to being Indiana basketball yesterday. And we all wanted to have this panacea hire that made us all feel warm and fuzzy about the future of Indiana basketball, which would have been Brad Stevens, right? And now we get this hire. And the reason why most of us on the assembly call on Thursday night said that if it was Mike Woodson, we would feel a little bit underwhelmed, is because of the amount of question marks that there are with it. And so, I see, lots of stuff in the chat where people are like, Ryan hates this hire, or, I'm all for it and all this stuff. None of that is accurate. What I think is, as I've said, this hire has a lot of question marks. And if it goes wrong, I think we're going to look back on it and say, well, it was kind of obvious how that went wrong, right? That is perfectly fair to say. And I think that's why there's some of these feelings of underwhelm. But to those folks who are having that knee-jerk reaction of feeling it's terrible, and this hire sucks and all that stuff, I would really urge you to have an open mind, and listen to some of the arguments for it, and try to think about what Coach just said, where, there's reasons that I don't think this is the greatest hire in the world, but I'm gonna get on board with it, and let's kind of see. And the other thing that's important to remember here, Alex, is what I want to get your reaction to, is a lot of the reaction to a Woodson hire, and I saw this in some of the discussions with Porter Moser too recently, are framed based on who people think Indiana could have gotten, right? And so if you're in the mindset of, well, shoot, Indiana could get Jay Wright or Tony Bennett or, Chris Beard or one of these guys, and now you compare that to the Woodson hire, no reason to talk about Moser anymore because he's not the guy, Woodson's the guy, then I can see where there's significant underwhelm. I've approached this all along not feeling like, certainly Jay Wright and Tony Bennett weren't reasonable names, but even some of the other names that people have talked about, like an Eric Musselman and some, Nate Oates, I never really looked at those guys as being legitimate options. And so when you started to look at who is legitimately Indiana interested in, and there's mutual interest, it whittled down the choices a little bit more to make the one that you settle on make a little bit more sense. Now, is that underwhelming? Yes, but it's as much, it's the hire itself, but it's also, I think, what's disappointing people is what this kind of says about where the Indiana job is. And the Indiana job is still a good job because their tradition is good. You have a good recruiting base. There's crazy fan support. You're going to get paid a lot. But, I thought Sam Vecini made a great point on Twitter yesterday when he was comparing the Texas and Indiana jobs. And he basically said, look, these are both great jobs that if you get the right guy, you can win at the highest level. But there's a smaller subset of people that are going to be right for the Indiana job than are going to be right for the Texas job. And part of me wonders if what Scott Dolson faced in trying to hit the biggest home run he possibly could is fewer people being the right fit for the Indiana job. And as you kind of look at that, and now you think, well, look, we've got this guy with NBA experience. His players rave about him. He does this, that, and the other. We're seeing some examples in college now. We'll talk about why some of those analogies are really flawed, but we're seeing some examples, at least, of it working. Maybe this is something we should give a try. If the opportunity cost isn't one of these huge proven names, it starts to make a little bit more sense. And I explain all that because in some of the conversations I've had with people, I feel like my head hits a brick wall a little bit because I think people have had unrealistic expectations for who Indiana could get. And if you had those unrealistic expectations, this hire is going to seem a lot more underwhelming than it should. Now, what needs to happen is this hire needs to work and you build the stature of the job back up. But, 4 straight hires haven't worked. That's probably going to have a lingering impact. So anyway, I wanted to get those thoughts out, and I want to get your reaction to it because maybe you disagree. But as this started to go on, it certainly seemed like the actual options for Indiana were there were fewer of them than maybe we initially thought there would be.
The first thing to know about any coaching hire is, like you said, the immediate reaction is pretty much meaningless on either side. You can call it a home run, you can call it a whiff, but we won't know for sure what is actually going to transpire until maybe a few years. I mean, everyone said Archie Miller was a home run nationally, and in his first game against Indiana State, he lost by 21 points on his home court, and then later that season also lost at home to Fort Wayne and had an underwhelming Big Ten record. And so all the national people who are now criticizing this hire love that hire and now say this is a bad hire. So that's the first thing to remember. In terms of the hire itself, I don't know Mike Woodson. I've talked to people who can't say enough great things about the person and the human being he is. So that to me is that means something. At least you want to have a person of high character, I feel like, leading your program. That's, first and foremost. In terms of the basketball side of things, he's coached in the NBA, obviously knows the game at a high level. Otherwise, you don't become a head coach in the NBA. You're not an assistant for, the tenure that he's had. If you're not well liked by people and you're able to show that you can help guys get better. So I think from that perspective, Indiana's going to be pretty well covered. My questions come more along the lines of the staff, who's going to be around him, who's going to be helping him get players. And if you would have just told me today that Mike Woodson was the hire without the Thad Matta piece, I would maybe be a little bit less optimistic about it. But the fact that they're bringing in a coach who had a ton of success in the Big Ten, won multiple Big Ten titles, went to a national championship game, won Big Ten tournament titles, recruited 5-star players, knows the conference landscape as well as anybody, and he's going to be right there as a point man on the staff. Now, he's not going to be a coach, but he's going to be on the staff, and he's going to be around the program. To me, that makes this a whole lot more sense. Now let's see what happens with the 3 assistant coaching staff positions. But, I just keep coming back to, coaching hires are an imperfect science. I mean, you can say whatever you want in the immediate aftermath, and we're really not going to know how it works out for quite some time. So, Jerod, like you, obviously this wasn't, in terms of if I was making a list of what was most likely when the job opened up, this wouldn't have been the name that I put at the top of the list. But at the same time, Indiana's really done a poor job in recent history of hiring coaches. And one thing I will say about Scott Dolson is he's been around Indiana University and the basketball program for a very long time. He's seen what has worked and he has seen what hasn't worked. And I do think that there's going to be a much bigger emphasis this time around, not only on who the head coach is, but getting the right staff around to make things work. Because I think that was a huge shortcoming of Archie Miller's tenure, was there wasn't necessarily the right people around him to make him successful. And Scott Dolson at least is showing here right off the bat that he's going to get Mike Woodson, somebody that's been in the position, as a head coach at a prestigious Big Ten university and has had a lot of success. And so it also tells you the fact that Thad Matta is going to do this, he must have some level of belief or confidence that it can work. Otherwise, why would Thad Matta stop whatever he's doing, which has basically been retired for 4 years, to come do this at Indiana? There's obviously something that he sees here that makes him believe it can work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a really good point. And look, I'm seeing just some notes in the chat. Someone said, we had to go down to our 25th option to do this. I don't think that that's the case. I really think that we heard about this one early on. To me, and I hope that we find this out, so this is kind of me just positing, kind of reading tea leaves. What I kind of think happened here is it seems to me like Scott Dolson had a couple of templates for how he thought that this might go. Brad Stevens obviously being one, kind of the home run hire. Then you've got another bucket of, some experienced college coaches. And then, okay, if we're going to do the IU guy thing and try to make this kind of a more, a more modern program in terms of the offense that we run, how we're getting kids to the NBA, that kind of thing. I think that was another template. And as you look at the possible names there, Mike Woodson is the obvious one. And so I think that this was kind of in the thinking from the beginning. And one, I don't, for even a split second, think that Scott Dolson views this as settling or underwhelming. I think he's extremely excited to have Mike Woodson and to pair him up with Thad Matta and whatever staff that they get. And again, as I said, and we'll go through this here in just a minute, some of the arguments in favor of Mike Woodson, for those of you who haven't seen that piece, but I would not read it that way. Some people might not understand what kind of what the thinking is there, but I definitely think that there's a plan. And I guess that's why, to me, I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out, because I'm intrigued to see what that plan is. Coach, I sent you an article earlier today. And Alex, you might have seen this. And I don't remember the name of the coach. It was a coach from Maine. He used to coach at Maine. Do you remember the name of the coach?
I'd have to look it up here.
I remember.
Real quick.
I'll put it in the show notes. I'll tweet it out. But it was basically, and Ken Pomeroy retweeted it. That's how I found it. But the basic point of the article was about, look, things are changing in college basketball. They are changing. Coaches have less power now. And he wrote this from the perspective of a coach. It used to be, when players had to sit out a year to transfer, once you went, the coach could kind of say whatever he wanted in recruiting to get you to go there, because you were kind of stuck once you got there, unless you were going to pay the price of sitting out a year, and used to be you didn't have that many options to do things outside of basketball to earn any income. And now things may change with name, image, likeness. But his basic point was things are changing. Players have more power now. And his point as he went through that is what you have to do as a coach now in college basketball to succeed, because players have options and they're going to be able to leave when they want to, is you have to build a culture that players want to be a part of. And what Indiana has had for the last 4 years is kind of the opposite of that. We have not had that. And that's why a lot of people are kind of freaking out about all these players who are entering the transfer portal. Oh my goodness, should we have really done this? Well, we paid $10 million to fire a coach, and now players are in the transfer portal. A lot of those players may have transferred anyway. They may have entered the transfer portal anyway. So that argument is kind of bunk. But what's important now is building a program that players want to be a part of. And again, I'm gonna stress, if there's some videos out there with New York Knicks players talking about their relationship with Mike Woodson. Jared Jeffries has talked about his relationship with Mike Woodson. This is a guy whose players love him. He builds real relationships with them. And the other thing to remember, I know that, no high school players in Indiana, or very few, are going to know who Mike Woodson is. No high school recruits anywhere are going to know who Mike Woodson is. But when Mike Woodson talks to them, he's going to be able to share experience as an NBA coach, and that will mean something. And Mike Woodson has been a star in college, a role player in the NBA, and a bench warmer in the NBA. There is not one position on a basketball team that he's not going to be able to relate with, because he's played all of them. And so I know that this stuff doesn't show up on a Ken Pom profile, and it doesn't look that impressive on a Wikipedia page. But I think we have to be careful about using old paradigms to judge current and future hires and basketball programs, because stuff is changing. The way that Juwan Howard is running his Michigan program is a very forward-thinking, modern way. The way Eric Musselman is running his Arkansas program, it's different. Things are changing. And I think what this template that Scott Dolson settled on is going to do is going to allow us to do some of that. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but that's why I'm intrigued by it, as I think this is a forward-thinking template for how to run a college basketball program that is going to bring Indiana kind of into more modern times and become a place that players want to be a part of. So again, it has all of the question marks. I understand the downside, but that's where I think people have to look. And I think in the conversations with fans who have just knee-jerked and they're out on this one, I think they're viewing this hire and this decision from an old paradigm. And the reason why I have kind of trusted Scott Dolson's thinking here is I really think he was trying to view it from a different paradigm, which is, I think, more accurate for where basketball is going in the future. Coach, I'd love to get your reaction, because I know you read that article that I sent you.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely 100% accurate what you're saying. I think it's about hiring the right person. And sometimes resumes can reveal the right person, and sometimes resumes can't reveal the right person. And in today's age, it is about relationships. I've said on the show a lot of times, it takes a degree in psychology to really move a program in the right direction. And as I stop and process this, when you're dealing with guys on the NBA, that's even a lot tougher than dealing with egos at the college level. I mean, there's never enough basketballs in the NBA, and he was able to get to the playoffs several times, and he's been able to do that. So when I start looking at that, I'm thinking this program needs that identity to be rebuilt. And the one thing that we can take from this is that maybe coaches and players and national media and everything don't look at Indiana the way it used to be, that Scott Dolson understood that. And I'm with you. I think he came with the plan. He mentioned the CEO thing, and it looks like kind of that Mata might be in and be a part of that to work with Dolson. He mentioned that he wasn't going to shut off an IU guy or a guy without experience right from the start when he announced the Archie Miller thing. And I think that foreshadowed what his search was all about. Did he look for some experienced coaches? Did he look at Brad Stevens? Yeah, if he's worth his salt as an AD, he's going to make those phone calls, to see, because then he could maybe go there. But I think this ultimately was his game plan. And really, it's people were down on Moser and all these, but these guys can relate to kids. And you connect the NBA. The more I'm sitting here, the more maybe just the IU glasses are coming on. But I've been in the NBA. I know what it takes to get to the NBA. That is going to be huge on the recruiting trail once they introduce, "Hi, I'm Coach Woodson. I used to play," and they get to know him. And you said that. Talk to him. That NBA connection, the offense being a little bit more modern from an NBA perspective. And then it depends, too, on looking at the staff. If he gets some young guys in who want to aspire to coaching and learn from someone like Mata and Woodson, it could be a really good developmental staff, too, where you're going to develop players. So we all need patience. We should have had patience. And most of the negatives is coming from we wanted the top 2 or 3 names in the business to come to Indiana. And we don't know if that was even what percentage that was a possibility. This has the potential to really work. And we're at a point 20 some years after Coach Knight where things didn't work, hiring coaches with experience. It didn't work. So maybe outside the box is what's needed to get this program back to its rightful winning ways and stature across the country.
Alex, one thing that I want to talk about is a lot of people are going to immediately jump to compare this to what's happening at Michigan with Juwan Howard. And obviously Juwan Howard came from an NBA background, has had a lot of success early with Michigan. I think it's a flawed comparison in several ways. Number one, Juwan Howard was never a head coach before he came to Michigan, but he was an assistant under Eric Spoelstra, obviously one of the best coaches, had relationships with LeBron James, all of that stuff. And while Mike Woodson had a better individual career in college than Juwan Howard did, Juwan Howard was part of the Fab Five and is a cultural icon in college basketball that a lot of young players today still know because of the 30 for 30 and just how important the Fab Five was. But more importantly than that, and this is where I think the concern comes in with Mike Woodson, is Juwan Howard took over a program that was rolling. I mean, John Beilein, he left for the NBA. The program was in great shape, and Juwan Howard has kept it humming. Mike Woodson is taking over a program that is stuck in the mud, and that's probably a charitable description of where Indiana basketball is right now. And probably my biggest concern about this is not just that Mike Woodson doesn't have college head coaching experience. He doesn't have the specific experience of rebuilding a college basketball program, which is even different than just kind of coaching a program that's rolling. And so that's where bringing Thad Matta around, who has built successful programs, I think is really going to help. And so it doesn't erase the question mark because, again, we haven't seen this from Mike Woodson, so we don't know what he's going to be able to do in that regard. But if it was just him and there wasn't a proven guy like Thad Matta that has that experience, I'd be even more nervous. Like if you told me originally, hey, it's going to be a Mike Woodson, Thad Matta package deal, I feel even better about it. And I probably wouldn't have described it as underwhelmed initially because that knocks out one of the big negatives that I would have had about Woodson coming to take over Indiana. So I'd love to get your thoughts just on that comparison between Indiana and Michigan, which people are going to make, but is flawed in so many ways. And then, how you think Matta can help with the rebuilding process that Mike Woodson's going to have to go through.
Yeah, the comparisons, the only comparison is that they both played at a school that they took over at, and they both had coaching experience in the NBA and weren't a head coach before that. But other than that, like you said, the situations are totally different. Michigan was a program that was basically turnkey for Howard to take over and hit the ground running with success. And this situation, isn't the same. What I will say is that the opportunity to be good pretty quickly is there if Woodson can, make the right moves quickly. I think that involves retaining a lot of the current players and also the transfer portal. And a lot of that's going to come down to, figuring out what the needs are from a program standpoint, filling those holes. But, I think that, the comparison is pretty weak in that because the situations are just completely different. I mean, I know that's what people are going to point to immediately and say, well, Juwan Howard did this at Michigan and Indiana's trying to do the same thing. I don't necessarily see it as apples to apples. And the other thing, just kind of going back to some of the things you talked about, Jerod, people not liking this hire and saying maybe that it's a little bit underwhelming. I mean, you also have to understand you got to get somebody that really wants the job and wants to be at Indiana for the right reasons, right? I think the last coaching hire, some things have come out. Everyone loved that hire at the beginning, and I believe in the last couple of weeks there's been some discussions from some national folks that Archie Miller maybe didn't even really want to take the job, and maybe wasn't in it 110% from the beginning. And so with this guy, I think you're getting somebody that really wants the job. Now, whether he's going to succeed is a totally different story. But I think the fact that he's ready to take on the challenge and is willing to surround himself. We've already seen the fact that I don't think there's a lot of guys that would probably say, yeah, I'd love Thad Matta to come and help me oversee things. I mean, the fact, to me, that shows a little bit of humility on Woodson's part, the fact that he wants Thad Matta there, right? I mean, if he wanted to just come in and do things his way, he wouldn't be willing to have that type of setup. So to me, that's a good sign. And I think you got to approach it with an open mind. You got to see what happens. Let's see what happens with the staff. I can think of a few, I don't know what the staff's going to be, but there's obviously a few former IU players with a lot of experience in the Midwest and the Big Ten. There's another former IU player right now working with the Pacers that some people have wondered if he would come and be on the staff. I mean, like I said, I think there is the one thing I'll tell you is from an IU perspective, and people have told me this. I know Scott Dolson wasn't who hired Archie Miller, but he was around for the hire. And I think one of the things that they would have done differently there, looking back on it, was to have a little bit more input on who the staff was going to be. It was just basically like, Archie, go get your staff and it's your job. I think more care is being given this time around to make sure that whoever they hire is being surrounded with the best people and the best team to help them, be successful. Because ultimately, you can be a damn good coach, but if you don't have the right staff around you, you don't have the right support people, you don't have the right team, you're not going to win very many games. And so the fact that Mike Woodson's willing to surround himself already with Thad Matta, and I'm pretty confident that they're going to get a really good staff around him. So we'll see if it works. I mean, there's no perfect hire. And the other thing is, on this hire, there was no hire that Indiana was going to make short of Brad Stevens that everybody was going to be happy about. I mean, you've got some people saying now I'm done with IU basketball or whatever, and things on Twitter. I'm like, well, then I guess you weren't really ever in on IU basketball if this is kind of what takes you away from it, because the program has been great since Branch McCracken, all the glory days back in the early times of the program. And into the future, Indiana basketball, because of the fan base and because how many people care about the program, will continue to be relevant. I mean, everyone on Twitter, like the national folks, were, oh, how Indiana's fallen, but yet they were all tweeting about the job for weeks and weeks. That kind of proves how relevant the brand still is, and all it takes is getting the right people around, and getting a chance to turn around. I'm not saying this hire is going to work. I'm not saying it isn't going to work, but you got to let it play out and see what happens. Is basically what everyone has to go into this with. Otherwise, why follow the program or why be a fan if you're just going to go ahead and say now that it's a failure? I mean, just stop watching if that's your attitude, right?
100%. Alex, thanks for coming on short notice, man.
Yeah, you said something. The Michigan thing is the Phil Martelli and the Thad Matta, while they might hold different roles, is very similar, even though the Juwan Howard thing is a little different. But that humility, you bring that point up, and I think that's kind of, the last couple of coaching hires had some different personalities. Mike Woodson seems to me to be a very calm, cerebral person who's going to think through things. I haven't watched him coach for a long time, but just in the few interactions that I have seen on video, that might be what's needed. That a lot of us were not thinking about when you just pay attention to the resume, but the humility to have someone on staff. And it's so important as a head coach at whatever level you have. If you have another head coach there to bounce things off of, whether it's administratively, if that's his role, or he's on behind the bench with the clipboard, to have those things available to not be a yes man, but to be there and bounce things off is just vital at whatever level. And it's hard to find that level of experience to be on the staff. And then it doesn't count towards the 3 paid assistants. So now you can go out and get 3 more paid assistants with that. I just think that is what is moving me quicker to the looking forward to this regime than I was when it was initially announced.
Well, the other thing you have to remember, you don't last very long in the NBA as either a head coach or an assistant coach if you're not well liked by the players, right? Because it's a players' league. The players dictate, for the most part, usually who coaches the team. And in many cases, it's a superstar league. And the fact that there's all of these players that have played for him saying these things about him that are glowing reviews means that he can make connections with people and that he's well respected. Does that mean he's going to get all the recruits that Indiana fans want him to get? Not necessarily, but it does show to me that, he is capable of building the relationships needed to get. I mean, it only takes, 10, 11, 12, 13 guys. That's all you need to get on the roster. He doesn't have to get every guy. I mean, you can say he hasn't recruited, but how many guys can say I scored, X amount of points in college, was a first round draft pick, coached in the NBA, was an assistant coach in the NBA, worked with, countless. I mean, he worked with Carmelo Anthony. I mean, if how cool would that be to be able to say, hey, you got questions about who I am as a coach or who I am as a man? Why don't you call Carmelo and see what he says about me? I mean, he's worked with guys that are at the highest level of basketball, and they've all said really good things about him. So, as I said, we'll see what happens. We may not know right away. It may not work out. It may work out. It may be average. Who knows? But I think one thing we can all agree on is that Indiana basketball needed a new direction. Now it's got a new direction, and we'll see which direction it heads in.
Thank you, Alex. You can go check the server. Make sure it's still up.
It's still up. I would get a text. I've learned from our 2017 experience where I was panic calling you to try to help me figure things out. We've upgraded since those days. So we're things are looking good. We'll see. We'll have to get some episodes of the podcast out this week, and hopefully once this is all confirmed, I would assume there'll be some type of announcement or a formal press conference this week. Although I was thinking about this, the women play tomorrow for a trip to go to the Final Four. So I'm not sure that it'll come tomorrow because obviously you don't want to take any of the spotlight away from them. So thanks for having me on, guys. I'll make sure to download the rest of this episode later and catch up on everything I missed. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
See you, Alex.
See you guys.
All right. Let's bring in our next guest here. We just have an assembly line of guests here on the assembly call. This is our good friend Eric Pankowski from Hoosier Hysterics. Do we need cigars? Should I go get some of my cigars?
I'm disappointed that you don't have them already.
I'm inside.
I don't. It doesn't matter. Light them up. Burn the place down. I was disappointed in hearing Alex saying, "Oh, we don't know if it'll work out." It's going to work out. I mean, what are we doing? We're fans. It's going to work out. Like, it may work out. It may not work out. It may be average. No. We're Indiana. This is a hire that says we're special. We're different. We believe we're special and different. We're going to double down on that, and we're going to win being us. I love it.
Yep.
The Thad Matta component is great. I think it's really smart for all the reasons you guys talked about. But I just go back to, we're Indiana. Mike Woodson is Indiana. He's from Indiana. He played in Indiana. He won a Big Ten title. He was a warrior for Indiana, coming back from injury when he had no business coming back from that injury. He's loved Indiana since he was a kid. He loved it playing there. He's loved it since. And he wants to come back as the legacy of his career to return us to the greatness that he bought into as a teenager. I am, as the kids say, here for it.
Let's go.
You know what I like is Mike Woodson's going to be, if anybody gives him any crap or, whatever, he's going to be like, dude, I won the Big Ten MVP playing 6 games. Don't give me any mess.
That's exactly. And by the way, I guarded and played against Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan in the pros, and Isaiah Thomas, who, by the way, Isaiah Thomas and Mike Woodson are close. You don't think having Isaiah Thomas more involved and feeling just more part of it with Woodson and his group will just feel better for Indiana? You don't think that'll be impressive for recruits to come to games and now see, I guarantee you, seeing a family of Indiana former players together and in a prominent place, taken care of at games, treated the way that it should be? Recruits are going to feel that. Their families are going to feel that. Their AAU coaches and high school coaches in the state are going to feel that. It matters. And we don't have to build to it. It's going to be there from the beginning with Mike Woodson.
Yeah.
And look, we got to know him a little bit. He came on our podcast. We spent well over an hour with him, and we fell in love with him. I mean, we were already in love with him because he's a Hoosier and what he did. But you hear him talk. He's thoughtful. He's sobering about it. Like, he takes it very seriously, what he does.
Yeah.
He takes the relationships that he builds with players very seriously. I talk a lot to Jared Jeffries, who played for him in New York. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to talk to Jared yet, but I think Jared's going to come on our podcast this week and talk about his experience playing for Mike Woodson and speaking from a player's perspective on what players think of him. They love him. Yeah. They absolutely love him. Jared told us, and he'll talk about it on the podcast, that with Woody, you go out there and you're trying to make your dad proud. That's what it feels like. Well, I mean, my God, what could be better than that? I mean, what could be better than that? So, and beyond that, Jared talks about how he's just a great basketball mind, like a really good coach. And there's a GIF out there that you can find of him like balling up his fist and cold cocking DeAndre Jordan on the sideline. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have seen that. It's funny.
It's phenomenal. It is phenomenal. So
it is.
I just got off the phone with a couple other former players who I probably shouldn't name, but they're all like, we're in. We can get behind this. And
at an absolute minimum, we are going to find out if the hypothesis of bring this back to the family, we are going to put that to bed. We're going to find out if it works. I share your enthusiasm for that part of it. I know, when I wrote about that in the argument for Mike Woodson, my 5-point article, that was one of them, is you're going to immediately bring the family back together. And whatever value you assign to that, it's going to happen faster with him or with any other IU guy than if we'd gone outside, the IU family. And if you think that matters to building a culture and all of those things, which I do believe that really matters, well, that's why this has unique upside, because this represents the ability to do that more than any other hire would have.
If it didn't matter, Tom Izzo wouldn't do it. Mike Krzyzewski wouldn't do it. Roy Williams wouldn't do it. Guys that have been in places for a long time that dive back into their past. If it didn't matter, why would they waste their time? They're really secure in their jobs. They don't need to do stuff just to do it. They do it because culture and family, the family feel, matters. And we are one of the few places in the country that has a rich history that we can exploit that and we can make it meaningful. And we haven't done it for 20 years. And it's about time to do it again. So I just want to say this. I put this out on some boards too. People that are coming out like, oh, this is terrible, this is blah, blah, blah. I just want to remind everybody, for that guy out there, whoever your name is, turd, burglar, parrot, 72, whatever, you don't get any points. You don't get any money. You don't get any credit that you can use anywhere. If in 5 years this doesn't work out, you can go, look at my post back in 2021. You don't get any benefit from that. So if you're a fan of Indiana, what in the hell is the point of that? Just get on board. You do not get points for it. There's no fantasy prize at the end for calling out something working or not if you're a fan. I get it if reporters want to do it. I get that that's kind of their job. But if you're a fan, you don't earn anything for that. All that there is to root for the thing that makes you happy, which is Indiana basketball. So let's get on board and support the hell out of the guy. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I'm in with both feet. This thing is working.
I'm on board with that. Coach,
it is,
you want to jump in?
It is exciting. It is exciting because regardless of who the new hire was going to be, they were going to have to bring the family back together. That was going to be a component. We've talked a long time about what traditions we need to keep and how to modernize the game. Well, Mike Woodson's an NBA guy. There's the modern part of it. You're bringing in Thad Matta from outside the family, who's a really good coach, and you have a guy who could bring back the former players and unify. It might be the best of both worlds. We're that's the thinking outside the box is, the next guy was going to have to do a better job than the last couple of guys have done at bringing the basketball guys back. And that's just a big part of any program. You read, I don't care, small school, Division I, Division II, NAIA, they cherish those who have gone before. And if you're any kind of coach, you respect the hell out of the players that went before and build that up. That's what's been missing from Indiana. And I know people say, Coach, you're old. You're living in the 80s and 90s. You were down there in the last championship. You wanted an IU guy. I really didn't want an IU guy, but I want a guy to bring everyone back together. And if it happens to be an IU guy, so be it. And a guy that with NBA ties, it might not be April before I talk myself into this from last week. But I get what you're saying, and I agree. And at some point, whether you like it or not like it, it's Indiana. It's the Candy Stripes. It's why we're here on the show and over 1,000 people are watching. Get on board, root for it to work. Don't root for it to not work. It's simple.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we talked to Will Sheehy recently. Will Sheehy didn't know Indiana from Montana State. That's the truth. He grew up in Florida. His dad wasn't recruited by Indiana, like the one school that didn't recruit his dad. He had no connection to Indiana whatsoever. Didn't follow him, nothing. He came to Indiana. He didn't know who Brian Evans was. He probably thought Brian Evans was like some kind of like heir to a sausage empire somewhere. What was the name of it? Was it Bob Evans Sausage, right? Like
Bob Evans.
Yeah. He had no idea who Brian Evans was. Brian Evans comes into that gym, came into the locker room and talked to them before a Purdue game. You know what? Will Sheehy told us it mattered. He saw what it meant to these guys that came before. He saw what it meant to the guys who put the banners up there. And it gave Will Sheehy a little bit more seriousness when thinking about what the jersey meant that he was putting on. No one can convince me that that stuff doesn't matter. No cynical reporter, no national pundit who wants to take shots at Indiana. You can do that all day long. But I talked to guys who aren't from Indiana. Victor Oladipo is another one. He got there. He picked Brian Evans's mind, picked his brain. Tell me what this is about. It matters to the people who play. And by the way, if it doesn't matter to you, then don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. Go find somebody else. That Mike Woodson isn't going to bring in players that don't care about that. I mean, Loyola, I know there was a lot of talk about Porter Mosier, and we talked about him a lot too. Mm-hmm. It's not like that guy was recruiting top 100 players. You know, he was recruiting guys that bought into his system, and it got him to 2 Sweet 16s and a Final Four in 4 years. Culture matters. Our history matters. And finding people, recruits and staff that you can recruit and hire to that thing is crucial. I am pumped up about it. And again, if I came out and wasn't pumped up about it, what good would that do me? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But I'm genuinely excited. Mike is a really good guy. The people around him really like him. I also want to say this. Mike was part of bringing Coach Knight back in February. He was part of that elite group of former players, Randy Whitman, Mike Woodson, Quinn Buckner, Steve Green. Those were the guys that were crucial in bringing Coach Knight back. It means something to him. It's in his bones. And that is important. And you think Mike Woodson is leaving a nice, lucrative paying job with the New York Knicks to come back to Indiana to not give it his all? You think he's coming back to fail? Like, he's going to put everything he has into this because this will be his legacy at Indiana. And he's willing to put a untarnished legacy on the line for this. He's going to give it his all. And the fans, we owe him the same. That's what I truly feel.
Yeah. I think people can feel how they want about the hire, have their personal feelings, but I agree with you, and I tweeted this out. As fans, let's be responsible with our public comments. And what I mean by that, I don't want to tell somebody how to be a fan in terms of how you should feel about this. You feel how you want to feel about it. And I think there's ways to comment about it in a constructive way that, suggest that you have questions about it. That's fine. But support it at the end of the day. I think that's what's so important, is that we have a united front as IU fans, that we're going to get behind this. I do think that is important.
You're kinder than I am, because I'll be honest, I don't understand you can have them personally, but publicly voicing why? What does it matter if you question it? You think Scott Dolson's going to read your comment and go, oh man, Turd Burglar 27 didn't like it. Maybe I should rescind the offer.
No,
I mean, it's because matter.
It's because people like talking about it online, and they like debating it with each other. Well, okay. Yeah. No. I agree. We can, that is the motivation. Yes. No, I agree with you. And personally,
it doesn't matter. We're for Indiana. We are for Indiana. And we do know this. There is no bad that can come from being positive online, on chat boards, on Twitter. There's no bad that can come from that.
I believe that.
By the way, Scott Dolson knows that if it doesn't work, he'll take care of it. But no bad can come from being positive. There is potentially some bad that can come from being negative right now. Yeah. So why do it? There is no cookie or award or trophy for it. And look, I will tell you, when the team is horrible and people boo at games like they did at the end when we had the one game where they were at, I know a lot of people got upset that. I actually don't mind if people boo, like they paid their money and it was terrible. But there was proof that things weren't good at that point. There's no proof of that now. Let's let it play out and be positive until that time. And with that, I've got kids in a swimming pool that are probably drowning, and I know Ryan's going to come in and be negative. So I'm going to let Ryan do that.
This pendulum is swinging, baby.
You don't know that.
No. All right. Well, I love.
You can watch back later and see what I say.
Yeah.
I love all of you. I love Ryan. I love Assembly Call. I love Indiana. I love Mike Woodson. I am in with 2 feet. I'm in it so much that I risked 3 kids under the age of 13 swimming without me looking. So, I mean, that's passion right there.
Thanks for coming, Eric. Appreciate it, man.
Right. Be good, guys.
We'll talk later. So I want to, Ryan, we want to bring you in. I want to make one thing clear here, folks that are listening on the podcast. And I think the way that we have framed this, it probably sounds like every single comment that we're seeing on Twitter and in the chat is negative. And that is definitely not true. So I want to be clear, there are certainly some people that are against this hire, that are underwhelmed, as we talked about. There are a lot of people that are really excited about it. There are a lot of people that in the hour that we've been talking have gone from wondering about it to feeling better about it. So, I don't want you to feel like, if you're like, well, wait, I'm kind of excited about this hire, am I like a lone voice? No, there are a lot of people who are buying into the upside that this hire has, or at a minimum, just getting behind it because it's Indiana and it's Mike Woodson. So I just want to make sure that we frame that properly. I do want to say Sam Bassini is one of the national voices on basketball that I respect the most, and he has some really interesting tweets. I want to get to those. But first, we got to get Ryan's thoughts. Obviously, Ryan, you and I went back and forth on the Mike Woodson hire a lot on Twitter. Not that I was 100% for it, but I saw more upside in it than you did. And I know I saw some tweets from you that you talked to some coaches that had some different thoughts on it. So I want to give you the floor to tell us what you've learned and how you're feeling about the hire.
And what you guys were just talking about with Eric about fans and negativity and things like that, I agree. I think that I sometimes, because of my job as being a pundit to give my opinion, have to be more brutally honest than I think a lot of people should. Let me qualify all of this as I tweeted out. I will support and root for Mike Woodson as hard as I would any other coach who got it. If Brad Stevens got this job, I'd support him at the same level as Mike Woodson. I want Indiana to win. It is something that since I stepped on campus in 2003, have not had much of as an Indiana fan. I want him to win. That said, I will tell you that I'm skeptical about this hire for a number of reasons. And Jerod, we've talked about it endlessly. I will say the first thing I want to address is the Thad Matta thing, because I'm seeing people say, well, Thad Matta is involved with the program. It's going to be great. He can't fail. I agree that the Thad Matta hire is excellent, and it's the part of this that I like the most. because he's somebody who knows college basketball inside and out, and attaching him to IU as sort of a basketball czar kind of thing is a great idea. The reason my expectation, my enthusiasm is a little tempered is this Thad Matta unpacking his bags and staying for 5 to 10 years and helping direct the direction of Indiana basketball? Or is this coming to town for 1 year, helping Mike Woodson get set up, and then leaving to maybe go back into coaching? We don't know. But I'm saying I think you have to keep that in mind when you look at this. This could be for Thad Matta. He wasn't going to get a head coaching job. Hey, let's go help this coach sort of set things up and get his program running and then leave. Like, if Thad Matta were directing the rebuilding of the program over 5 years, I'd feel a lot better about this. And I think it would be certainly a phenomenal hire. Hopefully he is planning to, unpack his bags and stay for a while. But I've seen people say that Thad Matta's there, it's going to be great. And it's like, well, we don't know what Thad Matta is not going to be out on the road recruiting because that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that unless you're on staff. He's not going to be, there's certain things he's restricted from doing. He's not going to be in practice, leading drills and stuff. That's not, so we got to remember what he's being hired to do. Now, again, I think that he's great at setting up and directing a program, and he's done it at a number of places and been wildly successful. If he's here for a while and is tight with Mike Woodson, they're going to get along, and this is going to be a co-effort, all for it. Think that's a great move, especially given Mike Woodson's lack of experience at the college level. So that's my only thing holding me back from fully diving in on the Matta, this is amazing thing, is we don't know what the future is going to hold.
It's fair.
I'd also been told that Matta, there were a couple jobs he was hoping would open and didn't. And so this seems like his backup plan, and maybe he'll come to Bloomington, love it, and want to stay forever. So just to get that out of the way, the Mike Woodson hire, I want to start off by saying that everybody who knows Mike Woodson loves him. He gets high marks as a person from everybody, that I've talked to. My issues come when we look at his track record. The fact that he's 63 years old and has never been on the road recruiting, has never coached in college basketball. And if you think that it's easy to transition from the NBA to college or college to the NBA, it is not. They are completely different animals. College basketball is a 365-day-a-year job. It's more like 345 days a year. You get a couple weeks off, but that's it. And at 63, that's very difficult.
Typically for Indiana, that's been around tournament time.
Yeah, well,
unfortunately.
And when you look at his track record, he did do a rebuild in Atlanta and took them to the playoffs when they had been awful for a long time. But I will say, people who continually point that out act like he built that from nothing with no talent and just managed to do it. I mean, he had several all-stars he was working with. I mean, he had Al Horford, Josh Smith, who was the other one? Mike Bibby, Joe Johnson. I mean, he had a roster. He had
it that way.
No,
you have to have players to win the NBA.
Yes,
what they say is he went from having very little talent to getting players and working with them to have one of the best records in the Eastern Conference.
But let's be real, he didn't recruit those players; they were drafted.
Of course,
I mean, it was so he got talent and he won. Credit to him, he won. But after he took them to the playoffs and in 2010, they fired him. Why? Because he disappointed. They didn't go as far as they should have. With that talent, they should have gone further. They lost in the conference semifinals. They didn't go to the conference finals, didn't go to the NBA finals. They had enough talent to do both. They didn't. He went to New York as an assistant under Mike D'Antoni, and it was, I don't want to swear here, it was an S show. And he took it over and took them to the playoffs. Went 18-6 his first year, went to the playoffs, lost in the first round of the playoffs. Second year, they won the Atlantic Division, which was weak at the time, but they still won it, and lost again in the conference semifinals. His third year, second 2.5 years, essentially, as a head coach, the third season, he went 37-45 and didn't make the playoffs and got fired. There's not,
and they've never won that.
They've never been back since. So nobody's are, and they'll be good this year. I think they will finally get over the hump this year, but
with him back. As an assistant, just saying.
But what I will say is there's, a lot of people have built up, I think misrepresented his coaching record as something where there were these high successes after sucking for a while and building something. He didn't have great success in the NBA. He made the playoffs with some bad franchises, credit to him, but it's not like he's a slam dunk as a head coach, amazing hidden gem. And here's the other thing. There are some really smart guys running NBA teams, some of the smartest in all of sports. They were one of the first leagues to really recognize analytics and go deep into it on baseball as well, but NBA, and go into it and be able to discover hidden gems and things like that. He hasn't been a head coach since 2014. Nobody else has hired him. And so as Indiana, you've got to look at that and be like, all right, why not? And clearly Scott Dolson's confident in it. What I will say is this is an enormous gamble by Scott Dolson. And the idea that, well, he loves Indiana, so he'll give his all. You know who loves the school he coaches? Patrick Ewing loves Georgetown more than anybody. And he has not been successful there. It's been a disaster. They made a run in the Big East tournament to make it into the tournament and got blown out in the first round. And he was probably going to get fired if they didn't do that. There have been plenty of stories about guys who love their university coming back and failing miserably. So the idea that he loves IU, that's not going to carry him at IU. I'm sorry. The Big Ten's too good for that. He will have to be a really good coach for this to succeed. He'll have to have a monster staff around him for this to succeed. I think we all agree with that. I don't think anybody is going to sit here and say that it doesn't matter who his assistants are. He will have to have
huge.
Yeah, an incredible staff around him. Not saying anything controversial. I'm just saying. And at the end of the day, though, whether Thad Matta's there, whether you bring in the greatest 3 assistants in college basketball, at the end of the day, it comes down to who your head coach is. I don't care how good your staff is. In the end, you win or lose because of your head coach. He's the one making timeout decisions. He's the one calling plays at the end of the game to get guys the ball. He's the one who players commit to when they recruit. That is the key here. What does Mike Woodson do at the college level? And the issue I have is not hiring Mike Woodson. It's that I think there were guys out there who have an established college track record who would have said yes, that I feel like were passed over for Mike Woodson. And that's just from talking to people that I talk to often about what was available and what they wound up doing.
Do you want to name names on those or no?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Because it's not fair to those people.
Okay.
It could be sent out that they aren't happy where they are or whatever. But I think there are people who certainly would have taken the IU job if it had been sold to them as you'll get everything you want. The way that it was sold to someone like Brad Stevens. If you sell other coaches on that, they could buy in. And when you come out at your press conference and spend $10 million to get rid of Archie Miller and then say, I have a blank check, essentially, he said, I have a blank check. He said, I don't want to say it's a blank check. You're saying it's a blank check. Let's be real. I have a blank check to figure this out. And you wind up with a guy nobody was looking for. Yeah, that's disappointing. And I get why people are disappointed. Will Mike Woodson succeed? I don't know. I certainly hope so. I'm skeptical. I'm not saying he can't succeed. I'm saying I'm skeptical. And I hope, and I've tweeted this out, I really hope he proves me wrong. And I hope he's the most successful coach IU has ever had, other than the guy who coached for 30 years. Mike Woodson's not coaching. Mike Woodson's not coaching for 30 years, guys. I'm just letting you know now. But I really want to know what the plan is. And bringing in Mata, you say, okay, well, they have a plan there. What's the rest of the plan? Because I've been told that if Woodson came, there was a sort of a package developed, and maybe that was Mata. But there was sort of there was a deal that was being struck, and that was a couple weeks ago. So I don't know, if that's changed or what. But yeah, I get fans who are sitting there like, Mike Woodson, like that's what we got. Like nobody is looking for him as a head coach. No NBA team's going to hire him, and no college team was looking to hire him. Now I get the IU connection. This is probably the only college job he would take, but I'm giving voice to the fans that are skeptical because I'm skeptical. I'm not saying it won't work. I'm not saying that Mike Woodson isn't smart, isn't a great guy, doesn't love IU, all of those things. Those are all true. But can he coach in college basketball? And you know what the answer is? Nobody knows. There is no one who can definitively say Mike Woodson will kill it at Indiana. No one can definitively say
you couldn't definitively say that about anybody.
You're right.
You don't know.
You're right. But the
Chris Beard could have come here, and you wouldn't have known if he was going to kill it.
I'm not denying that, Jerod. But there are some people you'd say you can look at and say, "All right, that's going to work," and you have a
Archie
really
Miller.
good idea.
All I'm saying is let's have a little humility with what we're certain is going to work and not work, or what has a better chance than other things.
What have I said? What have I said?
I know.
I'm not saying it's not going to work.
I know, but some definitive statements are slipping out, and I just want to make sure that.
I'm sorry, if Chris Beard came to Indiana, he'd probably win. Like if Brad Stevens came to Indiana, he's probably going to win. Now, again, whether those guys would have been willing to take the job, I mean, certainly Brad Stevens wasn't. Would Chris Beard? I mean, he's pretty comfortable at Texas Tech. He's got some good things going on. And now the Texas job's open. Who knows if he's going to go there? But no, I'm just saying there are people you can say pretty solidly that guy's going to win there. And I feel like nobody has any idea what Mike Woodson's going to be like as a college coach. And so you're Indiana, you're this huge program. This is what you're banking on. It's a huge gamble. And I'll say this about Scott Dolson. If it's not successful, do we really expect him to be the athletic director for a long time if it's not successful? I mean, ADs get to make one hire in basketball in Indiana. And so he's clearly confident because he's staking his job on this, essentially. And good for him. If this is what he believes in, and he's going all in on it, good for him. He got his guy, you know? But I think it's worth noting that if it fails, he's probably out the door with it. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of confidence in him if this is a massive failure. So one other issue, and people don't bring this up with having a guy who is part of the family back as a head coach, it's really hard to fire them. And this has happened repeatedly at colleges. They hold on to guys too long because they're friends who are boosters, they're former teammates, all of that create backlash if there's talk of firing them. It's tough. It's a huge, huge, huge gamble. And so I hope it works out. But it is very hard to fire unsuccessful coaches from within the family. It is incredibly hard.
You are correct. All I will say is Woodson's age does mitigate that a little bit because he's closer to retirement anyway.
But Woodson's an incredibly well.
I agree. All I'm saying is
he's got 7 years left. Let's say he's got 7 years
and he got a 6-year contract. All I'm saying is that mitigates it a little bit.
It does. But I will say this: Woodson's also a competitive guy. He's not going to step down if things aren't going well. You know what I mean? Like unless there's just enormous pressure on him to step down, he's not just going to walk away. He's going to continue to think, I can fix this, as any coach would. You know, as any guy who has any confidence in their ability would. Yeah. You're never stepping down. You are going to fight tooth and nail, and that's a good quality to have. But coaches don't just walk away. You know, I mean, they have to be fired. Archie Miller knew what he was doing wasn't working. He wasn't walking away. You know, they had to pay him a lot of money to get him out of here.
Yeah. No,
so I just want people to know that if in 4 years, if this isn't successful, he's not getting the leash pulled like Archie Miller did. Like he's going to be around for a 5th year. If he has the exact same record as Archie Miller after 4 years, he's probably getting a 5th year. Like that's
okay.
I don't think he will. And
all I'm saying is I do think there's a good point to be made there. I also think his age and the close relationship pre-existing that he has with Scott Dolson could mitigate some of that. So, but we're getting way down the road.
I'm trying to give people the full scope of the picture as we walk into this. Like, and here's the thing. Do I think that Mike Woodson can outdo Archie Miller? Yes, I absolutely think that Mike Woodson can outdo Archie Miller for a lot of reasons. But Indiana isn't looking to outdo Archie Miller. So that, again, Indiana's looking to compete for national championships and return to national relevance, not just win 20 games. You know.
So yeah. So okay. So the only thing that
that's my 14-minute sort of rant there.
No, it's good. I wanted this show to provide all the different perspectives. So you got Rick Bozich, who broke the story. You've got Alex, who's analyzing it. You've got Eric, who's smoking cigars and fully excited about it. And you've got Ryan's perspective. So we've gone through an hour and 15 minutes. You've gotten all the different perspectives. The only thing that I want to say, because I do not want to get into a protracted argument, about the Mike Woodson stuff. We'll have plenty of time to do that. The only thing I want to say, because my goal with the Mike Woodson discussion all along has just been to push back against some knee-jerk reactions to him that I think are simplistic. My only issue with the way that you describe his NBA time is I think it's a little bit negative in terms of what he actually did and what he accomplished as a coach. And all I will say is, and the reason why, because what you said is that people have positioned this like he's done did some great job as a head coach. I think what people have done that have defended Mike Woodson is a lot of people just throw out, well, he won fewer than 50% of his games in the NBA. And it's like, okay, well, if you're just going to throw that out without context, understand that he took over an Atlanta team that had no talent at all. Their best player was a washed-up Antoine Walker, and they won 13 or 15 games. And that right there, if you remove that season, he's an above 500 coach, right?
Okay.
And
is
if you
500
just-
what we're looking for, though?
Okay, no. But what I'm saying is,
mean-
but it's a more accurate representation.
Sure.
Right. And for the people who throw out, well, they won 46% of his games. Okay, well, Rick Pitino won 46% of his games in the NBA. Now, Rick Pitino had a lot of great college experience, but just because you go into the NBA and win a certain number of games doesn't mean that's what you're going to do in college.
Completely
so all
agree,
I'm
but it's
saying
the
is
only evidence we
give
have.
his NBA career the full context it demands. That's all.
That's fine, but it's the only evidence we have of him as a coach. So you're going to focus on that. Now, again, you're right. Now, I hear a lot of people, and I've had this in my mentions all day, and you and I have clarified this, but comparing it to the Juwan Howard situation
we talked about that with Alex.
Yeah, it's
moronic.
moronic. It's it's stupid. So I didn't get to hear that part. But what I will say, one thing I will say about Mike Woodson is I will say you cannot look at his body of evidence and say it was a very successful career as a head coach. You can say he had some success.
I don't know, man. It's the toughest league in the world, and he took two franchises that aren't good and was their best coach in 30 years. That's pretty good. I mean, he was the best coach.
But as soon as as soon as Atlanta got to its best season with him, why did Atlanta fire him?
Because they didn't think in the NBA. A lot of times in the NBA, after 6 or 7 years, players tune a coach out. They go for a different direction. So, and that's what happened, though. Yes, it still happened. I mean, like you can't deny that it happened and just say, well, that's how it happens in the NBA. But he had a good. He wasn't great. He had a good tenure as an NBA head coach. That's all I'm saying. I feel like you're hesitant to say that he had a good tenure. He was a coach for 9 years. It was pretty good. All right. Well, then we have different definitions of what's a good.
I do. And we talked about this when you said I remember this was back in the day when Josh Allen was a rookie. You said he's already a really good NFL quarterback. I was like, he's average right now, and you were like, well, he's in the top 17, and I was like, that's average. Like, it's not good. There's 32 quarterbacks.
The legitimate concern that Ryan brings up, which I think we have to pay attention to if you're looking at resume. And I will say that sometimes this hire might be about non-resume stuff. And that's the gamble that Dolson is taking, is that the person, the organization, the group of people put together is going to overcome any resume stuff. But he hasn't been pursued by any other NBA jobs in 7 years, and he hasn't been pursued by any other colleges in 7 years. The reason he's a Big Ten basketball coach is because he played at Indiana. That means that the Indiana stuff is a lot bigger than the resume. And my point being is that your resume doesn't tell the whole story. If it doesn't, if you take over rebuilding jobs, you're going to have a sub 500 record. You could be a heck of a coach, but you spent 6 years rebuilding a high school or lower college level job, right? So sometimes it's the person, and that's the argument we got into when we were talking about Porter Moser. That he got fired and then went back. Well, it's the person. You're going to hire the person. So the resume evaluation that Ryan's doing, I think does give me, that's the underwhelming part from Thursday's show, the underwhelming until October, the lack of experience. Those are true, I think really true concerns looking at the basketball resume. I am starting to analyze this as more of a personality, the person, the direction, the CEO that Dolson wants to take Indiana in a certain direction. And this is the guy, Notre Dame football struggled forever from Davies, Weiss, Willingham. They got the right guy in who is an outside guy, Brian Kelly, and now they've stuck with him for 10 years. I think Dolson just said maybe people don't want to come here. Ryan says some people might still have come given the circumstances. It could have been, we're going to go for the top 2 or 3. They don't look at Indiana the way it did yesterday. Well, then I'm going to that second bucket. And that second bucket is a coalition of people that I think are good for Indiana and good for college basketball minds. And that's what we have. So I agree with Ryan on the resume stuff. That's what gives me pause. I don't think you can deny that the resume is really underwhelming. But the potential for who he is as a person and what he did within that resume, I think does give some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, no, that is the questionable part of it. So I agree with that. Just give his NBA time the proper context. Now, all I want to get to these tweets from Sam Vecini. I know we've got someone calling Ryan Debbie Downer. Someone said this isn't fun anymore, probably because we started arguing. So I apologize for that.
They don't like it when I'm honest. They really don't.
But I think these tweets from Sam Vecini are really good. And again, I know there's been this whole narrative going on for the last week or two about you can't trust the national media and all of this stuff. And certainly there are some voices in the national media that haven't been I don't think have been very fair to Indiana. Sam is a straight shooter. I think you can pretty much he's always been a guy that I've really trusted his perspective. So here are his comments. And he's a guy who knows the NBA and the college landscape. He writes for The Athletic. So he says, no idea whether Mike Woodson will work or not. I'll generally just note that his successful teams in the NBA when he was a head coach played relatively slow and were efficient on offense. Like everyone else has said, would be good for IU to hire a killer staff around him. We obviously all agree with that. He goes on, I do think there is a case that it's easier to enter the high major college coaching side than ever right now because of transfers. Everyone is kind of operating at a more equal playing field, not all equal, but closer at least right now. Finally, I will say it seems there is a negative connotation surrounding Woodson's time as a head coach. I don't think that should be the case. Won an increasing number of games every season in Atlanta for 6 years. Then his first full year with the Knicks won 54 games. He wasn't a spectacular, no doubt, or top 10 coach in the league or anything. His playoff record is concerning, but his time in the NBA is better than what his overall one-loss record was, given that he was thrust into a terrible Atlanta situation and the Dolan Knicks. That seems to me like a very fair assessment of Mike Woodson's time as a coach from Sam Vecini.
Why did he pick such awful franchises? God.
Hey, there's only 30 jobs. You take the ones you can get.
Of course, you take whatever
Don't say
job
anything,
it's
Ryan. He just picked Indiana. Don't be throwing that out there.
God, that's fair. That's fair. I have a question. Okay.
No. I want. Here's what I want to know from you, Ryan. Tell me what you're excited about. Like, where do you see the upside in this hire? I want to know, because I know that you can view this rationally. Where's the upside in this hire?
His personality, I think, and his ability to connect with people. I think the thing if I had to list the things I'm most excited about, it's having Thad Matta attached to the program is number one, way more than Mike Woodson. I think the Thad Matta thing, because Thad Matta has consistently built competitive, good programs and kept and sustained that for a long time, which is why I'm concerned if this is a long-term thing for Thad Matta or if it is just a short-term stopover to help set this up and then he's going to bolt. So Thad Matta is the thing I'm most excited about, being attached with Indiana. As far as Mike Woodson goes, personality and his connection to his players. And I think that people speak very well of him. But yeah, and you know what the other thing I'm excited about? Finally, the fans who are longtime Indiana fans have said, we need an IU guy. But you got him. Here's the deal. If this doesn't work, can we stop with that, please? Like you got your IU guy. All right. Because I've heard this from everybody since I started at IU in 2003. Needs to be an IU guy. Needs to be someone who played under Bob Knight. Whatever. Okay. That's it. Like you've got your IU guy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, let's never hear of that again, please.
Okay, we have some great comments that I have to get to. These are back-to-back comments. One is on Periscope, one is on YouTube. Jody says, Ryan is so negative, you wonder if it's fake. How can a person be so angry? And then Shay McNearley, Ryan, thanks for speaking the truth.
There you go. I'm trying to be honest with you guys. I've always been honest.
Nothing is fake. Trust me. Nothing about Ryan is fake.
We got Coach Woodson in the chat too, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, the other two great comments were who said this? Hoosier Fan for Life said Andy Bottoms is needed on the show tonight badly. We all agree with that. Definitely. And then Mike Woodson 42 says, who is Andy Bottoms? Andy Bottoms he's the legendary bracketologist and the original co-host of the show.
I'm sure everyone
couldn't be here.
Well, I've seen this by now already, or when you're listening to the podcast, but players are sending out some emojis, Logan Duncombe, TJD, kind of, if you could read that they're kind of interested, nothing, but there's a quote from Tyler Toshman on Inside the Hall that says, Logan Duncombe, the recruit that has signed, I think it's an awesome hire. He seems like a really good coach with NBA background, and they bring on Thad Matta, who has college experience. It seems like a deadly duo. And I know that Logan has entered the transfer portal, I believe, too. So we'll be interested to see how quickly.
No, Duncombe. No,
Duncombe.
Logan.
He hasn't. He's not even here yet. He can't enter the transfer portal.
But once he's signed,
no, you just have to. You just
uncommit. So there was talk about him.
Okay.
Decommitting.
Okay.
And so, how soon that Coach Woodson will get on the phone and start recruiting the
guys today.
That are in the portal, right?
Yeah.
But the initial two that we've heard kind of are looking at it like, okay, and that might be his NBA connections. That's again what's pulling me from underwhelmed to starting to maybe see the reasoning behind this is the combination of both Woodson and Matta. and those connections to the NBA, I think
That's the upside.
That's the upside.
By the way, Assembly Call's own Doc Libby, Yogi Ferrell's mom, tweeted, "I am personally behind him. Let's give him a chance." Always listen to the doc. She knows.
Absolutely.
But Coach, I think we need to do a segment. Coach Tonsoni interprets emojis from college athletes.
Yeah, that would be great.
I have no clue. Did you see me do this every once in a while? I'm trying to figure out, is that a one wink? Is that a smile? I'm so old. I only know one emoji that Mrs. Tonsoni sends me all the time. It's not
funny.
very nice.
All right. So, okay. Guys, we got a coach. We have a coach. And one thing, look, we're going to go back and forth on stuff. You know, Ryan, we've disagreed on what the level of upside is on Mike Woodson. I think we generally agree on what the questions are about Mike Woodson. I think we certainly disagree on the degree, maybe, to how likely those questions are to be answered in a negative way, and perhaps the degree of the upside. But I know certainly all of us on this show, and I look forward to getting Andy's thoughts on the hire, but I know that he will agree, is, our position is going to be what it's always been, is we're going to try and analyze it as best we can. We'll always be candid with you about how we genuinely feel about stuff, but we're going to be supportive, and support the hire as best we can in the way that we do on this show, which to us, it's a little bit different than what Eric described. I feel like it's okay to have a candid conversation online about pros and cons and analyze the stuff that happens on the court. But our goal is always just to kind of lead a conversation and provide a forum for conversation where we can talk openly about that stuff, but we know that we're all coming at it from the same perspective, which is we want Indiana basketball to win. And we're supporting the men and women who are out there working hard every single day to do it. And I just think that let's take that tact with our public commentary. And everybody can decide for themselves how best to do that, but that's certainly what we'll do on this show. So we're not going to pump sunshine and tell you that Mike Woodson is the greatest hire of all time, but we're also not going to wallow in every negative thing and just assume that all the questions will be answered in a negative way. There's upside to this hire. There's reasons to like it. There's reasons to be skeptical about it. There's reasons to feel like maybe this wasn't exactly what you wanted it to be, but still to get on board and support it. And so I guess that would be kind of my final thought, is the hire's here. We have a coach. Now let's commence the part of the offseason where we dig more into his history and we watch some film and we figure out what kind of a coach he is and we listen to what ex-players have said about him. Let's learn about this coach. Let's learn as much as we can and have an open mind as we do it. Let's be curious, not closed-minded about it. And then obviously we watch the transfer portal and we see how many of the guys in the transfer portal decide to come back, how many go, and what this roster is going to start looking like. We got one answer, and now it presents a whole bunch of questions that I know I, for one, am really, really excited to start seeking the answers for. That's what we try and do on this show. So fun stuff, guys. Was not expecting to have a show today, but, news breaks and we got to do what we got to do. So curious to get your guys' final thoughts on a very important day in IU basketball history. Ryan, why don't you lead us off?
So just FYI, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to be honest with you. And I've always been honest with this audience and tell them what I think and how I feel about things. And just not trying to rip the hire or anything. I'm just giving you my honest perspective on it. I'm going to write about it for the Big Lead shortly. I think that it's certainly an interesting decision from Scott Dolson. And as I've said before, he knows probably to some degree that his job will be attached to this hire. And whatever decision, and if he's betting that big on it, certainly that'll give some people confidence that maybe this is the right thing. But it's also a young AD, young in his tenure AD, making a pretty sizable gamble and betting very largely on Mike Woodson. So we'll see what happens. I think that we all agree they better build him a monster staff who knows college basketball inside and out and has great recruiting connections, because other teams in the Big Ten are looking at this as an opportunity to raid Indiana because it's a new staff. That happens anytime there's a new staff, but it's a new staff without connections on the ground to the recruiting grounds in Indiana, who hasn't recruited before. I mean, the people we have on there, which is Mike Woodson, have not recruited before. And so you can bet that programs from around the country are licking their chops at this. And I got a lot of texts from people who cover the Big Ten who just didn't understand the hire at all and thought Indiana could do better. And so that's going to resonate with some people around the country. So it's on Mike Woodson to immediately calm those fears and getting a staff that people will then take a look at and be like, okay, all right. So he's got a lot of work ahead of him. This is not going to be easy. And it's certainly not going to be something where he's going to be able to ease into the job. He's got half his roster in the transfer portal. He's got to recruit them back. And then he's got to start going on the recruiting trail and getting transfers, start establishing relationships because he's behind the 8 ball for next year's recruiting class. I mean, he better hit the ground running immediately. And I bet he expects to. But this is going to be a very important next few weeks for Indiana basketball. And Mike Woodson, I know that he hasn't done this before, but he better nail it because otherwise you're putting Indiana behind the 8 ball for next year and possibly the year after. So here's hoping he is ready to go immediately.
All right, Coach, your final thoughts on this day?
Yeah, when word broke earlier today and Woodson was a hire, I'm not going to lie, I was underwhelmed and wondering, was it a hierarchy of no's that led to Mike Woodson? The more that I've been on the show, and the addition of Thad Matta has moved me off of that to less underwhelmed and more hopeful is my position right now, because it seems like maybe there was more to it than Scott Dolson might have had something like this planned, some sort of coalition planned and went after it. And I've always said I was going to trust Scott Dolson, and I'm not going to go back on that until I see either the negatives of this, or hopefully we don't see that. So as the more our guests have talked, the questions still linger. I wanted somebody with the college experience. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that was going to be the best bet coming in here. But this might end up with Thad Matta being here, being a combination of those things, bringing that IU piece back together. And so I'm willing to buy in, and that's just my fandom, my IU blind spot. I'm going to root for whoever, and it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. Come November, Mike Woodson's going to be on the sidelines. And so I really think that there are some positives, and I hope that those positives outweigh the negatives, obviously, and they're going to have to. Very excited about seeing the staff. They have to get some recruiting muscles in the staff, and then start recruiting those guys that are in the portal. Really pleased to see a couple of those guys that are supposed to be IU guys that are looking at it like positively. We'll see what the end result is, but ultimately Mike Woodson is coming home. He's our new coach, and I support Coach Woodson and Dolson, and hope that we have a lot more positive shows next year than negative ones. And let's go Hoosiers.
Yeah, I will just say in closing, this is not going to surprise any of you, but I'm excited about this. And there was a good chance I was going to be excited about whoever was hired, because it's a fresh start. And what this program needed was a fresh start. And we were going to get a coach that had upside of some kind, whether it was Porter Moser or whoever it was going to be. We were going to get a coach with question marks, but also upside. And so those question marks linger. I think we've talked about all of them. We hope that Thad Matta kind of helps to mitigate some of them. But man, there's a lot to be excited about with this hire. And so if you want to allow yourself to be excited, to see the upside, to get pumped for the fresh start, there's plenty of reasons there to do that. And so I hope that is the mindset that you will take as you look into this more. And I'll tell you this, my closing statement is, maybe part of the reason why I'm excited is I'm still living off the high of yesterday. Because yesterday, early evening, we got to see our women's team go out and beat NC State, make the first Elite Eight in school history. And we've now spent over 90 minutes talking about a program that has been so bad over the last 4 years, they had to get a new coach. When our women's team, has a coach who's doing an incredible job and has created, the best women's basketball team in the history of this school. So much to be excited about. And when I watch them play, I see connectedness, I see togetherness, I see enthusiasm, and I see a team with a plan that goes out and executes that plan. And I think the best case scenario for what Indiana basketball can be under Mike Woodson is to look like what I saw the Indiana women's team look like yesterday, which is a team that was fully bought in, talented, tough, together. It was great watching them. And so I hope that everybody, in the midst of all this coaching search stuff, I came late to the women's basketball program. People have been talking about it all year, how good they are. And I didn't really start watching in earnest until the last few games. And if there's any kind of holdouts out there like me that haven't fully bought in, they are so much fun to watch. And so, I hope that this news, I don't think it'll overshadow it. This is today. Tomorrow's tomorrow. It's a big Elite Eight game. We are going to try to have a post-game show for that. We haven't nailed down exactly and who can be on it. We're going to do everything we can to have our first women's basketball post-game show after that because we want to support them. And frankly, I got done with that game yesterday, and I just wanted to talk about it. I kind of wish we had a post-game show yesterday. But that's my final thought is we've got a women's basketball program that is showing us the template again for what Indiana basketball looks like because they're playing Indiana basketball. And I hope that as Mike Woodson takes over and this new regime happens and we rebuild the culture of Indiana basketball, that as it starts to improve, it starts to look a lot like what Terry Morin has been or what Terry Morin has built. Because they've got something special. Football's got something special. Baseball's got something special. Soccer's got something special. Swimming and diving's got something special. Like, we have something special going on with this athletic department, and now we just need men's basketball to catch up. And if that happens, legitimately, we could be looking at the golden age of Indiana sports. We're darn near almost there, but it's Indiana, and you got to have basketball rolling. We got half of basketball rolling. Now it's time to get the other half of basketball rolling. Hopefully Mike Woodson's the guy. I'm excited about the hire, questions and all. We're going to support it 100%, be here like we always are, and we hope you guys will join us. So that's all we have for you. We appreciate you guys being here on short notice. Ryan, Coach, thanks for jumping on. Our thanks to Alex Bozich, Rick Bozich, and Eric Pankowski. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow after the women's game. And then Thursday night, we'll have more analysis, and hopefully Andy will be here to give us his thoughts on it too. So take care, everybody, and we will talk to you then. And as always, keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.